As kids, we all lied to our parents. Oh, my stomach hurts, just to get out of school, right? But imagine this. In the 1970s, a group of perfectly sane people walked into psychiatric hospitals across the US and lied about hearing voices. And every single one of them got labeled as mentally insane. After diagnosis, these people acted completely normal from that point forward. No strange behavior, no rambling thoughts, and yet not one doctor noticed. See, this is the crazy, twisted story of the Rosenhan experiment, an audacious attempt to test one of the biggest questions in psychology. How well can we really tell sanity from insanity? What it discovered shook the medical world, sparked a crisis in psychiatric institutions, and shaped the very way we understand mental illness today. So, I ask you, is the girl with the half-shaved neon blue hair crashing out because the Starbucks barista butchered her name actually insane, or just having a normal Tuesday? Spoiler alert, lobotomize her ass. The early 1970s weren't exactly a golden era for mental health care. Psych hospitals were overcrowded, underfunded, and struggling with staffing shortages. Patients were treated more like inmates rather than people. Long stays, experimental treatments, electroconvulsive therapy, and antipsychotic medications were the norm. The stigma around mental illness was palpable, and normal versus abnormal behavior felt like a blurry line. People were terrified of some deranged lunatic running around like the damn Tasmanian devil. So into this turbulent world stepped David Rosenhan, a psychology professor from Stanford. See, he wondered, what if psychiatry's labels were more based on preconception rather than precision? What if madness wasn't as easily identifiable as doctors like to claim? Rosenhan decided to put the psychiatric establishment to the test. What came next became one of the most famous and controversial studies in the history of psychology. And yeah, I know, Stanford and early 1970s trigger PTSD from my last video on the Stanford prison experiment. Look, it just turns out Stanford really liked messing with people's heads back then. See, the psychiatric world was already grappling with a crisis of trust. The public was skeptical, patients felt like guinea pigs, movies like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest were starting to seep into popular culture, making psychiatric hospitals seem like damn castles of despair. You know, where Bowser keeps Peach, bro. And meanwhile, psychiatrists themselves are grappling with a lack of solid, universally accepted diagnostic tools. The lines between normal and pathological behavior weren't just thin, they were almost invisible at this point. Against this backdrop, Rosenhan's questions weren't just academic, they felt urgent and almost revolutionary. See, we needed answers to life's most difficult questions, like electrocuting someone's brain until smoke comes out, or drilling holes in their skull. Which one was better to fix a kid who wouldn't eat their vegetables? See, this is important information. So, to start the experiment, Rosenhan recruited 8 volunteers, or pseudo-patients, a painter, a teacher, a psychiatrist, 3 psychologists, a pediatrician, and a housewife. All completely sane, all instructed to walk into hospitals across the United States and claiming to hear a voice that was saying words like thud, empty, and hollow. Now I gotta be honest, bro. Saying you're hearing a voice saying thud is already pretty crazy. Bro, that's a sound effect. Who talks in sound effects? Listen, if I walk past someone muttering boing like a damn spring, I'm calling Donald Trump so we can bomb this guy. But with the experiment, aside from that one statement about auditory hallucinations, that was it. The volunteers weren't told to make up these elaborate stories, no aggression, no strange behavior, just one statement about a voice and their actual personal details. And what was the result? Well, every one of the volunteers was admitted into the hospital. All were diagnosed with psychiatric disorders, most as schizophrenic, one as manic depressive psychosis. See, not one person was identified as sane, not a single one. Now, I am pretty sure that hearing voices isn't exactly normal behavior, so the fact they were diagnosed doesn't seem too shocking. But stick with me, because what happened next, this is where the story really goes off the freaking rails. So, inside the asylums, the loony bins, right? The volunteers acted completely normal. They didn't pretend to be psychotic, they talked openly, kept diaries, read books, and chatted with the staff and patients. I mean, they basically were the epitome of the word normal. Most were exceedingly polite and cooperative, yet every single one was treated as if their actions were proof of their disorder. They were basically gaslit to the extreme. One of them may ask a staff member, "So Dave, great weather today. Will we be getting any outdoor exercise?" And the workers out here sweating, freaking out like Monsters Inc. "We have a 2319!" I mean, dog, it was bad. Note-taking was marked down as pathological behavior in the patient charts. Polite questions about their medical status, that was aggressive and anxious behavior on the official records. Meanwhile, actual patients started noticing the volunteers weren't like the rest of them. Patients would whisper to them in the corridors, "Hey, why are you really here? Are you a journalist?" As if the patients could spot sanity better than the damn staff could. What shocked Rosenhan and his volunteers the most was how easily staff molded neutral behavior into clinical evidence. If a person was pacing in their room out of boredom, suddenly it was anxious or agitated behavior. Making notes in the diary was labeled as engaged in obsessive behavior or compulsions. And volunteers weren't behaving oddly at all. Yet every neutral action was interpreted through the lens of a patient's diagnosis. See, it wasn't just that the staff missed the sanity of the volunteers, it was the context that shaped their perceptions. It was a warning about the dangers of seeing patients as labels rather than as people. See, these workers were dealing with an extreme bias. And we all have biases. That's just part of being human. But when you don't recognize it, that's when it can really warp your reality. I mean, bro, I'd be mad as hell if I asked my doctor about my medical condition and this idiot labeled me as aggressive. Bro, I'll show your ass aggression if you don't answer my damn question. So as far as how long they stayed, you would think the volunteers would be told off the bat, "Oh yeah, bro, you're clearly not a psycho. You gotta get out of here, buddy." But the volunteers were not released as quick as you may think. Despite acting completely normal, their stays in the Looney Tune bin lasted an average of 19 days and some of them as long as 52 days. Then upon release, every one of them was given a diagnosis of schizophrenia in remission, a label that would stick long after those hospital doors slammed shut. See, Rosenhan didn't just prove how quick institutions were to slap a label on people, he exposed how those labels shaped every interaction. In an environment where staff already assumed mental illness, every behavior was twisted up to fit the diagnosis. Even upon release, the volunteers weren't truly set free because they left with a stigma attached of schizophrenia. See, their medical records were marked by this mysterious psychiatric label. And at that time, a schizophrenia diagnosis, boy, that would haunt a person's life, impacting their career, relationships, even their sense of self. Because see, this was in an era where we barely understood schizophrenia. The public assumed you were some deranged mashup of Willy Wonka and Ted Bundy. You know, a ravenous, delusional freak out to skin people alive. When in reality, people with schizophrenia are far more likely to be a threat to themselves rather than others. With many reporting that the voices they hear tell them to self-harm or isolate out of fear of society, not to harm others. So these completely sane volunteers weren't just leaving with a pointless piece of paper that meant nothing, you know, like a college diploma. They were leaving cooked, bro, branded for life. So after this experiment, the psychiatric world, it's not looking good, bruv. Because see, Rosenhan published his findings on this famous paper called On Being Sane in Insane Places, published back in 1973, and it shook the psychiatric establishment down to its core. Psychologists argued and psychiatrists felt humiliated. One hospital even refused to accept the results. They claimed that if Rosenhan tried to experiment again, they'd spot the imposters every time. I know you're thinking, yeah, obviously, dummy, because now you know about it. But listen, Rosenhan, that dude was a gangster. So he agreed and announced over the next 3 months he would send more fake patients to test all these hospitals. What was the result? Well, the staff flagged 41 patients as imposters. See, they got better. Except there was a twist. Rosenhan hadn't even sent a single one yet. So let me get this straight, bro. You had 41 patients that were actually crazy that you released? Great. Now we got the damn Tasmanian devil spin charging down the streets on his way to Gumdrop Mountains to meet Princess Peach in the Peppermint Forest. This is pure madness. It has to stop. So as you can see, the mental health staff had proven themselves to be completely lost. A bitter lesson about dangers of overdiagnosis and preconceptions, as well as being trash at your fucking job. Now the fallout was profound. See, headlines across the country called into question the reliability of the psychiatric diagnosis itself. Even medical schools started adding the Rosenhan study to their curriculum as a warning and a lesson. Suddenly, psychiatry was forced to acknowledge its own fallibility. The questions Rosenhan raised weren't just about the volunteers, they were about every patient who was institutionalized for deviant behavior. So was psychiatric care a safeguard for the ill, or a weapon used to silence those society didn't really understand? The Rosenhan experiment inspired an era of self-examination within the mental health institutions across the world. And if you watch my video about the witch trials, you probably recognize this pattern. Silencing people for going against the grain of societal norms? Now that sounds familiar. So, the fallout. See, the Rosenhan experiment became a landmark moment in psychology. Its publication hit right where psychiatric institutions were already under serious scrutiny. The results of the study gave a major boost to the rising anti-psychiatry movement and helped shift mental health care to be more about the patients. Hospitals started reevaluating their diagnostic methods. The study really helped shape changes in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, also known as the DSM, making diagnostic criteria clearer and more behavior-based. Basically, there was no more, bro, that person sucks, bro, let's drill holes in their heads so they stop talking about politics, even though we should probably bring that part back today. But see, 1970, this is all just like old bullshit, right? See, it's tempting to think of the Rosenhan experiment as just some dusty piece of 1970s psychiatric history, right? But its lessons have never been more relevant than they are today. See, today, in an era where mental health is openly discussed on podcasts, online forums, and social media platforms, we're still grappling with the same core issues that Rosenhan posed. What does it mean to really be normal? How much trust can we put on psychiatric labels? And are we any better at telling sanity from madness now? Well, at least aside from the obvious lunatic shit, you know, like sleeping with socks on, putting your kids on a dog leash, or rocking a Karen haircut in 2025 still. Ma'am, what are you doing? And honestly, I don't know if we've gotten any better, because psychiatric medications are prescribed more widely now than ever before. Studies show that roughly 1 in 6 Americans take these meds. Antidepressants, antipsychotics, stimulants, anti-anxiety drugs, you name it. It's like, motherfucker, you work at Home Depot. Why are you on antipsychotic drugs and stimulants? Bro, you stack shelves. Oh, and also, ADHD and autism diagnoses have skyrocketed, sparking ongoing debates over overdiagnosis versus increased awareness. Y'all know that RFK or Alex Jones shit. See, they turning the frogs gay. But also, as you guys know, depression and PTSD are household terms now, especially on TikTok. Shit's wild these days, bro. 20-year-old girls with life-crippling stage 5 self-diagnosed PTSD after hearing an opinion that they don't understand. Bro, stay safe out there. Oh, and shout out to all the self-diagnosed experts with zero medical training, cause we love y'all. But look, from 1970 to 2025, psychiatric institutions have evolved, but questions about access, quality, and patient rights still do remain. The skepticism Rosenhan sparked should still guide us to ask the questions like, are we seeing patients as fully human? Are we cautious enough about quick judgments? Are we prioritizing understanding over labeling? You know, things like that. Because mental health is as much an art as it is a science. Its boundaries shift with culture, context, and time. What was once called madness might now just be embraced as neurodivergence. What we label as a disorder today might one day just be recognized as human diversity. Which is honestly good, because we don't need people in straitjackets like Hannibal Lecter just because they want to grow their hair long. You know, that shit would be absurd. A really good real-world example is with the LGBTQIA plus 2S 3.14 Y equals MX plus B. I'm really sorry, I just don't remember the whole acronym. I'll shorten it to LGBT. But in the older DSM, transgenders were looked at as having mental illness. And now in the DSM-5, the medical community has said, hey, maybe let's not say that they have a mental disorder. So in that sense, the Rosenhan experiment wasn't just a chapter in psychology textbooks. It's really a warning to us even right now. As mental health becomes more visible in our lives, its lessons ring louder than ever. Be wary of labels, stay open to nuance, and always remember, behind every diagnosis is a person, and behind every self-diagnosis is a girl's TikTok account. So the Rosenhan experiment was more than just a study. It was a warning. A mirror held up to psychiatry and society, forcing us to ask, how sure are we about where sanity ends and madness begins? So I ask all of you, have we actually learned from Rosenhan, or are we still making the same mistakes? Drop your thoughts in the comment section below. And if this story blew your mind, smash that like button, subscribe for more deep dives into history's strangest moments, and join us as we unravel the threads shaping how we understand the human psyche. But on a dead serious note, y'all don't go get your brain zapped in a straitjacket in an insane asylum, bro. Stay safe out there, and I'ma see y'all next time.